This story greets us with the cold and lifeless eyes of an unknown guy. No conditions, no reasons, nothing for the reader to know what is happening. Suddenly, the dead gaze is replaced by one of surprise. Fathomless blue eyes, framed by white eyelashes, wide open, staring at an unknown wonder in the sky. Immediately, a completely different picture is shown. A wild animal, a ram, looking ahead with poisonous red eyes filled with blood. Suddenly, the strange atmosphere is replaced by a carefree picture with a little girl and a guy in the center next to a white and black dog. The protagonist with a cart slowly walks along the shelves with food in the store. Headphones in the ears distract from the external fuss and concentrate attention on the notes of the melody. The guy examines a canned fish product, thinking about whether to buy it. The music does not completely save. Fragments of a conversation between two women about a mysterious case of their neighbor's bite by a rabid animal reach the guy's ears. It seems that such situations have become more frequent lately. He loads huge bags stuffed with food into the back of the car. The strategic supply of the necessary food is collected. So much should last for a long time. Cloudless weather, the rays of the summer sun fall to the ground. A light breeze and the breath of nature are the only things that will touch any person passing here. The protagonist receives a call. An unknown girl asks him to abandon his sister because they will not be able to support her, to which the guy replies that he would rather cancel the wedding with his fiancée than leave the dearest person. Suddenly, an animal gets under the wheels of the car. The man brakes sharply, but it is too late. Drops of blood indicate that a collision has already occurred. It is a miracle that he remains to maintain his position in the driver's seat and not fly out of it, making do with a slight blow on the steering wheel of the car. Red eyes stare at the guy, the sheep's hair is covered in blood, and his gaze is focused on the poor driver he got under the wheels. The protagonist's face lights up in shock. He is too surprised that such a collision did not cause serious, even fatal damage to the animal. The wild sheep just gets up and slowly walks towards the bushes as if nothing had happened, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. The guy looks after the animal. His thoughts revolve around the strange incident and the behavior of the animal. The car finally reaches its destination. Two-story houses can be seen ahead. The guy begins to unload boxes and bags of food brought from the store. A little girl with two dogs rushes towards him, her purple hair so noticeable that you can see the baby from afar. It greets its older brother loudly, just as dogs bark at its owner in a friendly manner. A peaceful picture appears before the eyes of the readers. A girl helps her brother to carry her purchases. He asks her how the day went, and the animals, wagging their tails, circle around them. A dog with white fur takes grass in his teeth, but the girl notices it in time. She jokingly knocks him on the head with her small fist, forcing him to spit out the plants. They pass by a pen with a bull. The animal stands motionless and only observes. Bloodshot eyes are stubbornly directed at people. There is something wrong with him, otherwise the bull was just resting. A buzzing fly lands on the animal's eye, but it still doesn't blink, ignoring the unpleasant insect. The protagonist's sister crumples the food on both cheeks. She finally waited for her beloved brother, who, as promised, cooked a delicious dinner. A pleasant conversation, a long-awaited meal, and the radio announces that a solar eclipse is coming. The little girl points behind her brother's back, and in the background, an announcer from the radio is counting down the seconds to the cosmic phenomenon. The sun is obscured by a dark sphere that shimmers blue. The picture in the sky is not very similar to the famous astronomical focus of the star. The girl begins to shake. Tears of fear come to her eyes. Something happens. Something inexplicable. A guy jumps up from the table. A dog with dark fur growls menacingly at an unknown phenomenon. The sister points to the sky again with a tiny finger, the man's eyes now also betraying fear from what she sees. He opens the window and an icy wind blows in his face. Snowflakes fly into the room, swirling around it in an ominous prediction. Hastily putting on the first jacket he comes across, the main character flies out into the street. Strong gusts of wind hardly allow him to move forward. Unbearable cold surrounds everything around, penetrates under clothes, into the soul. You can't hide from it. You can't close your eyes to stop the streams of the angry wind. The halo of the unusual eclipse is surrounded by bright light. It is as cold as the weather that swept over the rural houses in the summer. Behind the guy looms the silhouette of the bull from the corral. Its vague outlines seem especially sinister at the moment. Fear overwhelms the guy, makes him freeze in place from what is happening, but does not allow him to turn around and see the impending danger. Suddenly, one of the guy's pets appears, his eyes expressing rage directed at who knows whom. The bull's gaze flashes with terrible anger. Blood, the seemingly changed environment, and the bone-chilling cold do not bother him in the least. A dog flashes in front of the guy's face, wide open eyes waiting for an attack. However, it does not follow the shadow of the dog. The man turns around to finally face the danger, or at least know what to be afraid of. He only manages to jump away from the bull that decided to attack him. The dog clings to him by the scruff of the neck, trying to divert the attention of the mad beast to himself. Perhaps now it is a fight of two animals, and not the escape of the main character from an angry bull. The dog's attack gives the guy a chance. His legs pick him up. Fear is still visible in his eyes, but instincts and reflexes make him run without looking back. The bull's delay does not last long. The dog flies into the wall with a loud sound. The temporary obstacle is removed. The protagonist grabs the bow. His fingers reflexively pull the string. He squints to focus on the target. Unexpectedly, a blue glow appears in front of the bow in the panel as in the game. An incomprehensible square scheme seems to adjust the arrow to the target. Along with one arrow, 3 more appear. The guy releases the bowstring, and the points rush dangerously towards the enraged bull. However they fail to hit the rabid animal, it stubbornly continues to advance on the poor guy. The bull catches up with the man, but he manages to jump to the side. It is not possible to maintain a stable position after a dangerous maneuver, and he falls to the cold ground. Meanwhile, the younger sister is also in danger. The maddened dog, once the most affectionate of pets, has directed his rage against the little mistress. She does not have time to attack. The main character remembers that his younger sister is waiting for him in the house. And if the animal from the pen is mad, then the same fate can befall his pet. He repels the attack in time. Without wasting a second, he takes his sister in his arms and hurriedly leaves the once cozy and safe house, trying to run as far away as possible. The girl closes her eyes tightly in fear. Her brother is already exhausted, but they cannot give up. Their lives are at stake. From behind, the outline of a raging bull reappears, and a strange panel reappears in front of the guy's face. He quickly puts the baby on her feet, leaving her in the barn, asking her to wait for him there no matter what. As soon as the protagonist manages to close the door of the annex, a white dog attacks from behind. A fierce blow falls on the back. Bloody streaks left by the animal quickly appear on the skin. Another dog, still conscious of an adequate state, in revenge for the owner, tries to prevent him. While both animals are distracted by their own battle, the bull again aims at the man. With a quick swing, he grabs an axe lying nearby on the ground, now the only weapon that offers any way to fight back. No wonder the guy stopped near a tree. This is his trap for the bull, which blindly followed it and got caught. The advantage worked. The protagonist raises the axe over the carcass of a motionless animal, which is diligently trying to free its horns from the tree. However, the imaginary chance of victory is ghostly slipped from the man's hands when a rabid white dog stabs him in the neck with a crunch, forcing him to drop the weapon from his hands. And as the final chord of the sad end, the bull frees its horns and with fury pierces the man with them. Here it is, the end. The hero feels his life dissolving in the surrounding water. No regrets, he only wants silence. Suddenly he opens his eyes, the light blinds him. But this is the sign of life, he still feels the world around him. The thought that he was dead had just come to him, but reality proved the opposite, as did the absence of animal wounds on his body. Memories burst into my head. They seem to belong to their owner, but they show a completely different picture. The protagonist is furious. It seems that lightning flashes near his body from anger. He does not look like himself, but he is so dangerous. And 2 game panels appear in front of the guy. The reality becomes more and more strange, as if he was in a game. Small electric shocks from the rest of the memories pierce through his entire body, revealing that he actually died and then resurrected with the help of a game system that gives its player survival abilities. The picture is formed in his head, but it's not time to rest. He wraps around the jaws of the mad dog and ties it up so that it can't bite or hurt someone again after waking up. The hero remembers his sister. It is unknown how long he was unconscious and what happened to his sister. He gently shakes the girl's body and sees that she is only asleep, she is safe, and no one has touched her. As long as he manages to find a quiet moment to think about what happened and explore the game system, the man understands that the abilities given to him still need to be pumped, and for now he is weak. To begin with, he decides to deal with rabid animals, of which there are probably a lot now, especially in the city. He burns the carcass of a mad bull that he killed in the moment of his ability to avoid spreading rabies. Then the guy enters a small room in the basement, a secret place stuffed with all sorts of weapons for defense. The man looks at the gun. It is comfortable, fits well in the hand, and is not too noticeable, which is very useful in a situation where you need to be careful not to give yourself away. The hero leaves a radio near his younger sister in case she wakes up, so that she can contact him and not be afraid of loneliness. The guy gets into a car and drives along a deserted highway, followed by a flock of rabid birds. And on the way, maddened wolves and all kinds of living creatures from the forest catch up. With his pistol at the ready, the young man deliberately traveled around the neighborhood to attract as many animals as possible that pose a danger to people. Suddenly, the road is blocked by a military vehicle. The main character barely has time to brake and not fly off the road. The sight is aimed at the guy as a sign not to move and put the gun carefully aside. One of the soldiers informs him that the city is not safe at the moment, so he should not go there under any circumstances. However, the warning doesn't bother the man at all. He is still heading for the city and decides to check on his ex-girlfriend to see if she is okay. The city is in ruins. Ambulances are just running to take the sick. Hospitals are overcrowded, and supplies of medicines are running low. On one of the streets, the protagonist notices a woman who is crying wistfully over the body of a loved one who has recently passed away. A terrible picture, however, the young man needs to move on. He would not be able to help everyone, and checking his acquaintances is more important at the moment. The police have set up a stopping point where all residents of the city can buy a fixed amount of food that is not poisoned by poison and radiation. There are arguments and long queues. People wait for hours to buy food, and some decide to get into a fight and win a seat closer to the beginning. And a mother and a child sit on the sidelines. She holds the hungry baby tightly to herself, covering her ears so that she does not hear all the horrors of the world around her. With anxiety, the guy looks at the surrounding cruel reality of the world, where survival is above all at the moment. He pulls up to the alley where his ex-girlfriend's house is located. It's not a long way off, but you have to be careful. A car pulls out of the corner. The main character turns the steering wheel sharply to the left to avoid a collision. The strange man gets out of the car and looks around cowardly. He walks up to the young man and addresses him. A city dweller offers to buy fresh food from him, arguing that he will never wait for his turn for groceries at the waiting points. The protagonist refuses, but the annoying stranger does not want to leave him behind, so he points the gun with threats, hinting that now is the very moment when the crook should leave. Crushed by a sharp lunge, the man hurriedly steps away from the car and heads with a bag of groceries to his place after a failed attempt to sell poisoned food. The path is clear. The guy enters the porch of the house. There are beams lying around. The doors of the entrance are wide open. Everything indicates that the situation in the house is not very safe. He knocks on the door of his friend's apartment, hoping that she will open it now and be fine. However, there was no answer. Then the man finds the key under the rug and enters the house himself. The room is a mess. The landlady would never let him in, and behind the stack of books, he notices pills. When he picks them up, he realizes that they are antibiotics. But the most important thing is what they are made of, namely the company responsible for selling them, which is the worst on the market for drugs with a bad reputation. After hard work on the field, it is worth taking a break, which is what the protagonist does. He is sweating a lot and tired, but he knows that he needs to continue. His younger sister notices the tomato sprouts, which are so small and green, but look alive, which is especially important when many crops from the fields turn out to be poisonous due to the poison. It's time to harvest. The system makes it possible to quickly grow modified seeds from the game store. The young man decides to try a tomato. The characteristics of the vegetable indicate the ability to replenish the physical energy of the bearer, and indeed, the effect turns out to be real. With such a harvest, there is a chance to survive in the new world. The guy understands this, and that the effort he puts into the farm will return to him many times over. Looking at the carrots from the neighboring garden, he sees that they will soon ripen. The panel of the system indicates the characteristics of the vegetable, namely the regenerative ability. The man decides that he will definitely try it in action, but later. The fast-growing harvest has yielded a lot of profit, so the hero sells some of the vegetables, for which the farm system gives him an agricultural robot. As soon as the hero has time to think about the small capabilities of the unremarkable robot, It quickly deals with the remaining harvest in front of his eyes, proving its effectiveness. Small blades of the android gleam in the rays of the summer sun, sheaves of hay and piles of food lie around. All this is the result of the work of a small machine. Meanwhile, the protagonist's younger sister sits in front of the TV with her pet. While the older brother works, she is distracted. The young man is thinking about serving a more lavish dinner today, just in time to celebrate a successful harvest. And after a while, he has an appetizing, freshly baked chicken in his hands. The little girl was glad that today they would have a delicious lunch, just like in the good old days when food was safer and more abundant. Perhaps it's time to celebrate the small successes on their farm. The family gathers around a large table and prepares to share not only a pleasant dinner between each other, but also a common joy. Even the pet could not resist the smell of the fragrant dish, but this does not go unnoticed by the owners, and he gets a piece. Suddenly, the girl remembers another friend of theirs who wanted to attack her and her brother, a white dog that was wounded during the fight. The brother decides not to disturb the baby and assures her that everything will be fine, and soon the white dog will recover and return to them, but for now it is better not to disturb him. He enters the attic, where a weakened animal rests in a cage in the corner of the room, but still furious. Suddenly, one of the system's faculties appears, the eye that notices everything that happens within the confines of the house and its territories. A man stands at the gate with a cigarette in his hand, nervously lighting it, waiting for the guy to come out. And he came for a reason. He has been short of food for a long time, and he does not know where to get unpoisoned food, and it is hardly possible. All the crops are dying on his lands, and there is nothing to feed himself with. The young man refuses to help his acquaintance, no matter how sorry he is, but now his own safety and security are above all. But the protagonist offers to share with him the dry rations he has left. This is the only thing he can give, and the man is happy even with this tiny help. The man looks after the departing acquaintance. In such a difficult time, he wants to help others more than ever, and he decides that a little later he will bring some more food, or rather, frozen vegetables, which he no longer really needs. He takes his younger sister with him. It's dangerous to leave her alone in the house, because if something happens, he won't have time to help her. They drive up to the old man's house, and there is the same destruction as in the city, even though they are in the countryside. Suddenly, they hear screams from the house of an acquaintance. The guy decides to carefully look through the windows of the house and check if everything is in order. A man holds his weakened son. It seems that everything is very bad because he coughs up blood and cannot stop. The picture you see is shocking. When trouble enters the house of your friends and relatives, it leaves a much stronger imprint on the soul. He quickly decides to test the regenerative ability of carrots, the seeds of which were given to him by the system. The father cries and screams. He does not know how to help his son, which makes it even more terrible. He is helpless and loses his native blood before his eyes. With a loud ringing, the window breaks and a parcel with food inside flies into the room. The man is distracted for a second and swears at the unknown man who decided to damage the property of their house. Then he unwraps the bag and finds a lot of fresh vegetables. And next to the carrots is a note offering to give them to the sick person so that he can be cured. However, this did not make the man happy at all. Rather, he took it as a joke, which further shocked him because of his dying son. But the guy asked me to try this stupid but probably working method. He is twisted by sharp pain, shortness of breath, and cough, but the symptoms of poisoning disappear before our eyes. The young man's father is happy, it would seem, when there is no way to save a loved one. Hospitals are overcrowded, and there are no medicines for this. The last chance immediately appears. The protagonist leaves the house. He is glad that he helped, and on the way he sees how one light bulb lights up on the street. It is likely that the power supply has been restored, which means that mobile communication has appeared. He decides to call his ex-girlfriend, whom he never found in her city apartment, as well as a trace of where she might go. On the way home, a blow suddenly hits the roof of the car, an incomprehensible jolt provoked by the animal's jump. The situation escalates. The main character brakes sharply to throw the mad creature on the hood of the car. Brutal eyes peek out of that darkness. The rabid animal is in the front, as it should be, but one blow to the front window, and the guy and his sister will be in danger. The beast really chooses such tactics, followed by a terrible grin, followed by a loud roar that preempts an attack. Then the young man quickly grabs the handbrake, presses the pedal again, only this time the gas pedal. There are no thoughts in my head, Now is not the time to think. It is time to act briskly, proactively, but as carefully as possible. A sharp jolt from the accelerated machine throws the animal forward with a loud bang, followed by a howl. The man also quickly pulls out a gun and aims at the beast's body. Now or never, it's life or your death. A shot is heard. Hot blood spreads on the hood of the car. The guy stands silently by the carcass of the animal. It should be removed, which he does. The heavy body doesn't give in so immediately, but after a couple of tries, he throws it to the ground. The rest of the road passed relatively quietly, and now the house was in sight. Heavy dark clouds were gathering above it. Thunder was heard, and lightning flashed. The hero enters the attic, where all this time a pet has been sitting in a cage, once affectionate and kind, but now fierce and spiteful. He takes out and puts on gloves. This is a protection against the dog's saliva, which can carry poison that can get even through a small wound. The dog's grin gets in the way, but the man takes his jaw in his hand and presses it lightly so as to leave room for food, or rather, healing carrots, the action of which justified itself earlier. He closes the animal's mouth in the hope that it will help him too, watching the animal's reaction with a careful eye. As soon as the young man lets go of the dog, it turns its anger on the owner with glowing eyes. It seems that the regenerative property of the vegetable did not work. Meanwhile, the little girl is sitting in front of the TV, but she wants to visit her brother because he does not return from the attic for a long time. The girl goes upstairs and finds her older brother distorted from behind. But the cheerful mood and grinning eyes are quickly replaced by a dumb look of horror, and the smile quickly fades from her face. She sees her friend, the pet she loves so much, lying in a pool of his own blood on the cold floor. The girl almost faints from what she sees. She closes her eyes tightly so as not to observe such a terrifying scene. Her brother's strong hands pick her up and hold her close. She feels uneasy. The baby's first sobs are heard. They grow with every second. This is crying for a faithful friend. The dog was buried the next morning under the shade of a large tree at the edge of the farm, so as not to be conspicuous and not to remind of the mountain. Seeing how sad his sister is, the young man decides to cook a fragrant chicken to please her, but it refuses to eat. It is impossible to leave the farm for a long time. Pretty soon, the guy returns to the owner's business. A game panel appears in front of him, showing his progress. The work is going well and smoothly, especially with the small but skillful agricultural robot that the hero unwittingly received. Suddenly, a notification from the system appears. It says that his house and household are not sufficiently fortified and protected, which means that they can become an easy target for thieves and looters. The man begins a series of transformations, the points that he received for the exchange of part of the products grown in the fields with his own hands. He uses to buy improvements. At the same time, the guy thinks about protecting his younger sister. He will not be able to look after her all the time, and it is dangerous to take her to the city with him. Then he acquires a mechanical protector dog and an equally robotic small bird. Despite its size, the man decides to test the hummingbird, and it knocks down the branches and foliage of the tree with lightning-fast charges. The young man also gives the command to attack the dog, pointing to the stone forward. The animal opens its mouth and gathers a powerful charge for a strike. The blue light slightly illuminates the surrounding objects, despite the bright afternoon sun. Fragments of stone fly in front of the guy. Perhaps the dog has also passed the test, although it is not of the highest defensive class, but it will be able to hold out until the return of the main character. A robot with paws approaches a despondent girl and lightly touches her shoulder with its nose, indicating its presence. She turns around and sees another dog standing in front of her, beautiful and friendly, maybe not quite real, but alive. The acquaintance has taken place, the baby cannot believe her eyes, and the new animal continues to caress her. Tears appear in the girl's eyes, only this time happiness. Her heart still aches for the deceased pet. But this heavy burden of childhood grief can be shared with a new friend. Meanwhile, in the pharmaceutical company responsible for the sale of antibiotics and other drugs that are not very reliable in their action, sits the president of the holding. In the hallway, a young girl, the secretary, is trying to catch up with another and stop her, keeping repeating that the head of the company is not there. The door of the office swings open. The vice president stands on the threshold. The president's secretary stands behind him frightenedly, his shoulders curled. The girl tried as best she could to lie that the boss was not there and to stop the woman. Without any preface or greeting, the vice president turns to the head of the company. She asks him what is going on and why, when people get infected and die, he does not give the order to help them. A smirk dilutes the president's face. He slowly rises from his chair and walks over to the girl. In response to the accusations, the hero declares that everything is fine, and in fact, he is now conducting important research that should not only help people, but eradicate the infection completely. The vice president calms down and is intrigued by his words, and she asks to see the lab. The lab's chief scientist meets her and takes her to a secret research area. They stop near a huge glass bulb inside which rested the body of a modified animal, resistant to contamination and radiation. At one point, his assistant approaches the head laboratory assistant and whispers something in his ear, which makes his face look shocked and annoyed. The heroine calmly observes this, and when the man asks to wait for him while he is away for a while, she easily agrees. As soon as they leave her, her face immediately takes on a serious expression. She touches a small, inconspicuous earpiece to turn on voice communication. On the other horse of the wire sits one of her assistants. The guy knows everything about technology and programming. It turned out that all this was a carefully planned plan to find out what strategy the director of the company was building, what he was hiding. The assistant opened the door for the girl, breaking the security system. Heavy doors open in front of her. She has played meticulously before, in the office of the head, to get here, ostensibly to check the work. The vice president enters a vast room where there are many huge tubes filled with water, but the most sinister thing is that behind the glass are the bodies of people. No one knows whether they are alive or dead. One exhibit in particular catches her attention. It houses a mermaid, a hybrid of a man and a huge fish. In the next moment, a peaceful picture appears in front of the readers. The sister of the protagonist, with a smile, picks up freshly ripened corn. She asks to cook it to eat. The guy complies with her request, and after a while, both of them are already sitting quietly and tasting a juicy vegetable, allowing themselves a couple of minutes of rest. They crush him on both cheeks. Meanwhile, the young man notices a call from the system, which means that someone is at the entrance. There turns out to be the grandfather's son, who recently came to the man with a request to share food, and later, with the help of a healing carrot, managed to save his boy. The protagonist hurriedly approaches the gate, taking off the bandage that protects him from the hot sun as he goes. He smiles and greets his acquaintance. The guy gives him the contents with food inside. It is noteworthy that this is the same bag with frozen vegetables and noodles that the main character previously gave to them. The acquaintance smiles a little nervously and asks for the fulfillment of the request. Or rather, he wants to borrow his car to go to the city. In addition to the transport itself, he also needs a driver, since he did not have time to complete his studies and get a license. The man does not refuse his request and agrees. Now that he has bought a mechanical dog and a hummingbird to protect the house, he can leave for a while and leave his younger sister in the house. The guy throws on a light jacket and at the same time throws a few words to the girl, asks her not to go anywhere and just sit and enjoy the cartoons. He pats her slightly on the head and grins. The little girl asks to go with him, especially in the company of an old acquaintance of the family. As soon as the young man has time to sit in the driver's seat, his sister jumps next to him and an acquaintance comes up to the window and greets her. However, the girl is still left behind. She looks after the departing car, resting her hands on her sides as evidence of her displeasure. The protagonist draws attention to his fellow traveler out of the corner of his eye, who looks thoughtfully out the window and is strangely silent. Then he decides to talk to him, asks if everything is okay and how he is doing. In response, the interlocutor only smiles and also asks a question, wondering if it is dangerous to leave the child alone at such a difficult time, to which he receives a rather vague answer, because the main character cannot tell about the farm system that helps him. The dialogue fades out. The driver keeps his eyes on the road while his fellow traveler picks up his phone and writes something. The guy, seeing this, decides to ask who he is writing to. It seems strange, but the young man just smiles and says that he asked his friend for some money because he does not have enough to buy groceries. Meanwhile, the younger sister of the hero, together with her pet, is watching a cartoon. They are heated by the plot and what is happening. The girl suddenly grabs the dog's fur and turns it towards her. She talks about colors, certain auras that surround the characters from the TV. The child also remembers that the son of their acquaintance also changed color before his aura was green, and now it has become bright red. The protagonist takes out a pack of bills wrapped in an elastic band and, without taking his eyes off the road, hands it to his friend after his words about the lack of money. The guy accepts them and heartily thanks him for his help. Such a gesture was unexpected for him, but opened his eyes to many things. The fellow traveler turns away to the window. His jaw is clenched. There are signs of nervousness on his face. He rushes, thinks, but it is not clear where this behavior comes from. At some point, the tension becomes palpable, crawls under the skin. The young man turns sharply and grabs the steering wheel, changing the direction of the car. The unexpected action of the guy is not without the reaction of the main character. He seriously turns to the interlocutor and, taking a closer look, asks what it was. The nervous hero does not immediately find an answer. He looks away and hesitantly says that he heard about the repair of the expensive in the direction where they were going. Meanwhile, a man in sunglasses grins menacingly and lowers his heavy fist on the table. In front of him lies a tablet where the red dot deviates from the baked route, which infuriates the stranger. The acquaintance clutches his head and begins to wail. He honestly did not want to do this. Now he cries and apologizes for his transgression. Unknown people came to their house and grabbed his father, and in return demanded that he carry out their order. So the boy had to come to him and ask him to leave together for the city. The man speeds up sharply, pressing the gas pedal to full force. He turns around because he realizes that they would be ambushed next. At the same time, the acquaintance continues to repent. The final blow is his words about why the main character had to leave the farm. The guy is horrified when he realizes that his sister is now being kidnapped in order to blackmail her in the same way. Strangers have found out about a certain medicinal plant that he has grown, and now they want to get it. Meanwhile, the girl sits quietly and plays with the dog. She enjoys the cartoon and does not understand what is about to happen. Suddenly, the dog jumps up. He heels in the direction of incomprehensible sounds, and the baby, suspecting nothing, asks him if everything is all right. And a squad is already standing near the farm, ready to break into the farm, and then into the house and carry out the instructions of the chief. The boy's acquaintance continues to ask for forgiveness. He did not want to do it, but he had to. He is afraid for his father. But the gesture with the money touched him so much that he decided to confess. The protagonist is furious. There is no room left for thoughts, only animal fear for a loved one. Now he thinks only about how to get back faster, just to be on time. This brings back the story of how it all started. After recovering from poisoning, the guy's father pats the guy on the back and jokingly asks how he was able to eat the healing vegetable without thinking about the consequences. But thankfully, everything turned out fine. The joyful father offers him something to eat, given that they have just had food. He says that he thanks God for such good luck and a favorable outcome of events. The young man thinks about the words about God. He understands that it is not him who should be thanked. The hero jumps up and directs to the door. The surprised father barely has time to say anything, but the son is already slamming the door. A man comes to his acquaintance, who is surprised that the guy found time to visit, and why go somewhere in such a difficult hour. Then he asks him to use the cameras. The hero wants to know who helped him to cure himself earlier and how. He points upwards to a pole where there is a camera that his interlocutor did not immediately understand. It successfully captures the entire street, so everyone who was there should be visible there. The next moment, the hero is already sitting at the computer and looking through all the recent recordings. The acquaintance does not understand what he is looking for, but he's not too interested. The son returned home. The father rejoiced at him again. Apparently, the loss that had almost happened had beaten him well, and the fear of loss had not yet gone away. Then he asks where he went and why. The son detachedly declares that he knows who helped them, and also that it is possible to use medicinal vegetables from the farm of an acquaintance as medicine if you just bring this information to the pharmaceutical company, and they will get a lot of money. For such a thought, the father loudly slaps the boy on the cheek to betray his acquaintance, and even a benefactor, for the sake of money, such a despicable act. In the present tense, trying to sneak away from the machines, the protagonist is ambushed, surrounded by enemy vehicles. He tries to find a way out, but it is too late to escape. Then he slowly gets out of the car, taking his acquaintance hostage. The head of the squad created to fulfill the mission is sent to meet him. He introduces himself and offers to solve the issue amicably, without casualties. The man only answers, wondering if he wants such cooperation, and what will happen if he refuses it. In response to this, one of the leader's henchmen takes out a knife, and sarcastic comments fall from the lips of the man himself. in which he calls for settling the conflict. Otherwise, everything will be resolved in a bad way. He offers him not only to tell him about the miracle plant, but also to share a share of the amount of money they will receive when they start selling a vegetable-based medicine. The guy looks around. His eyes are squinted. His gaze is thoughtful. He is looking for a safe way out of the situation, how to get out. Seeing such a rapid refusal, the chief decides to put pressure on the guy. He turns on the phone and calls his subordinates, giving the order to start the operation. However, this does not intimidate the hero, but on the contrary, causes him to rage that scares away others. It seems that even the air is ready to ignite from tension, and such a sight of the protagonist surprises those around him. A frantic force, threatening, hangs in the atmosphere, alerting the others. Seeing that the hero does not give up, the commander makes one last attempt, suggesting that he not bluff and cooperate. However, the young man is still extremely negative and is not going to make concessions. Then his subordinates are ordered to seize him. A game bar appears in front of the protagonist's sister, pointing to enemies outside the farm. The screen displays the kidnappers' figures in red, and next to them is a harvester, likely to be used as a battering ram. The man is driven by anger. He attacks furiously, knocking his opponents out of the way, and they, like pieces on a chess table, fly to the sides. One of the subordinates flies past the chief among them. He hardly has time to deviate so as not to collide with him. The bandit casts a glance at the fallen guy. The once clean and well-groomed suit has become dirty with bloodstains, and the shirt in the stomach area has taken the shape of a fist after the blow of the main character. All the while, the kidnappers track down what was happening on the farm. The man continues to fight off annoying enemies, despite the fact that they have numerical superiority in reserve. This does not prevent the man from calmly taking all the blows and returning them tenfold. His strength has increased many times. The guy makes an assumption that all this is due to the adoption of special vegetables that improve health and fitness. He smiles, realizing that now his level compared to the others is much higher. The benefits that the farm system gives him are incomparable to the threat. The time for fists has passed. Now he draws a pistol and points it at the main one. There is no trace of a grin on his face, only seriousness. But it touches and frightens the commander. He smiles nervously and still tries to insist on his own, to solve the issue in a different way. Then the young man shoots, first hits his subordinate, knocking him down, then aims at the man himself. Unable to speak, he tries to escape, even though one of the bullets grazed him, tearing part of his ear. Holding his arm, which was also injured, he directs it into the forest, hoping that the trees will be able to shelter him from the whizzing bullets that will soon run out. The protagonist pursues him. He spares no bullets, trying to hit and neutralize the enemy completely. Finally, the bandit finds a relatively secluded corner, or rather, a stone that will hide him from the eyes and weapons of the young man. However, such joy was premature. It is quickly discovered by the hero, and a system panel appears next to him. He pulls another firearm out of his inventory, which is why he spared no ammo, all because he still has one in reserve. The man turns around. Fear freezes on his face as he realizes there's nowhere to run this time. The guy points a gun at him. The opponent has no choice but to surrender or die. Meanwhile, near the farm, the defense system has completely finished off all enemy personnel who have recently tried to storm the area. All this time, the girls supervise the defense, directing its strategy against the invaders. The squad leader is lying on the cold ground. Blood is smeared all over his suit. Traces of beatings are visible, and he himself is not in the most vigorous state. The protagonist is still angry that his sister is being assassinated. However, he decides to ask some questions about who organized all this. The bandit has no choice but to answer, and then the guy asks him about the purpose of such a crime. He smirks. Perhaps 2 of the 3 answers have been received. The last question remains. The young man also clarifies that he had better tell the truth. Otherwise, he will face a slow and painful death. These words are followed by a punch in the face to prove their words and intimidate. Now that he's learned more, it's time to come up with a plan for how to proceed. The president of a pharmaceutical company receives a call from his subordinate. A voice on the phone tells about the current situation, or rather that the mission is completed, but the captured guy refuses to talk without a personal meeting. The head of the phone hangs up in irritation after that and leaves the office. The protagonist kept the phone near the commander's ear so that he could speak, but only what the guy himself said. The young man and his friend tied the enemy to a seat and change their clothes to match the image and set a trap for the president. Entering the abandoned building, the subordinates of the head of the company, as well as the kidnapped father, were already waiting for them. Smiling impudently, a man in a suit holds the old man by the hair and greets the newcomers. An acquaintance leads a bound-in-disguise gang leader, whom they decided to introduce as the protagonist himself. The president laughs and wonders how such a crippled guy could also demand something. The boy's father makes noises. He tries to say that they should run. This is a dangerous trap. Then the leader turns to him and angrily gags him. He kicks the helpless old man to the floor, not at all remorseful, while showing all his power. His son sees this. He shakes slightly, but he musters all his courage not to reveal his role prematurely. The president gives an order to his subordinates to continue to abuse the kidnapped, and they happily carry it out, continuing to kick the man. Suddenly, someone's foot lands on the head's face. This sudden reception takes him by surprise. It turns out that the protagonist has been preparing for an attack all this time by jumping down from above and landing on the enemy. He points the gun at the man, having previously put his foot on him so that he can't even get up. His subordinates are at a loss. They do not understand what to do when their commander is in the crosshairs of the unknown. The president turns as far as possible in his position to see who has pinned him down. The protagonist ruthlessly announces that he is going to kill him and anyone who is plotting to go against him using his sister. These words are followed by a smile, not malicious, but very frightening in this context. A gunshot is heard. The assistants see that the unknown has finished with their leader and rush at him to neutralize him. Without moving, the young man only pulls a couple of triggers, and the bandits, who did not have time to get to him, all fell on the cold floor. As soon as all the enemies are defeated, the guy's acquaintance quickly goes to his father. He was so afraid for him, and now he can finally exhale because everything is fine. The protagonist recalls how he took a merciless shot to the president's head, ending the threat forever from its founding. Father and son kneel down and bow, asking for forgiveness for the fact that they were going to use the guy for selfish purposes. Despite his apologies, the young man only replies that it will forever remain on their conscience, and they will not be able to throw off this burden, no matter how much they want to. He especially addresses the old man's son, noting that it was he who lured him out of the house and put his sister at risk, which means that he is most to blame. After that, he says that it would be better to cover his tracks, which means that he needs to collect all the corpses in one place and get rid of them. While the youngest of the family collects all the dead guards, the elder decides to help with the murdered henchman of the president, who pretended to be the protagonist himself in this skirmish. Beads of sweat appear on his face as he grabs the man's shirt and pulls him aside. As soon as he moves it a couple of centimeters, the dead man suddenly turns out to be quite alive. He swings at the old man. He had an ordinary shard of glass in his hands, which the man managed to dodge, but it still hit his leg. The man falls to the floor, facing his enemy. He sees that they are about to carry out another attack, this time the final one. Suddenly, his son appears in front of the old man. He shields him with his body, taking the whole blow on himself. The shrapnel stabs the boy's body with force in the area of the heart, causing blood splatters. Immediately on the other side, the main character rams the enemy with his car. As soon as he pushes the bandit into the wall, he immediately gets out of the car and rushes towards father and son. The blow was very deep. Blood had already begun to ooze from the victim's mouth, and his face had taken on a pale hue. The father cries uncontrollably. While his boy turns to the young man, he says that everything is fine, that this is payback for what he has done. He hands him a candy that he had previously found in a bag of vegetables. The sweets were planted by the hero's sister, and he thanks her for this childish but heartfelt gesture. His eyelids become heavy, his breathing becomes more difficult, and he lies on his father's lap, slowly dying. The guy lets out his last breath, and his old man leans over him, grief coming suddenly when it seemed that everything was already over. The man's clothes have his son's blood on it. He stoops, gets up, and without raising his head, goes somewhere. The protagonist looks after him. The drooping figure exudes unrestrained sadness and anger, and is going to take it out on the killer. He lifts a shard of glass over the bandit, who is slowly dying due to the compression of all his organs and blood loss. The next moment, the two emerge from the abandoned building, flames rising behind them, devouring all traces of the battle. The vice president of the company stands quietly and watches what is happening from the window. The unexpected news shocks her. The cup of tea in her hands almost spills in surprise. The president, as well as his subordinates, are dead, this is what she was told, and now the woman is standing in the morgue, surrounded by pathologists. While one of the specialists discusses everything that was learned during the examination, the girl takes up the cloth that hides one of the corpses. A charred human skeleton emerges from under the covers, and she asks how the murder took place. It becomes unclear whether the friend or enemy is the person who helped to get rid of the president of the company. For the girl, only the goal is unclear, and based on it, you can already put an answer to the question asked. The main character gives an old man a small robot, which he implants in his neck. The man decided to avenge his son at all costs, and the guy will help him with this. Both return to the farm, where they are greeted by the boy's sister with a tractor and a sandhill next to her. Her brother asks her what happened here, but the little girl is in no hurry to confess. She is afraid that her brother will fall out of love because she has killed a lot of strangers with the help of the system, and then tries to hide it. However, the caring young man takes her little face in his hands and assures her that everything is fine. He smiles, looks into the child's eyes, declares that she did everything right. Then the girl, perked up, puts on a serious face and agrees with him. In addition, the baby reports that those bad people had a red aura, which surprises both the boy and the old man. The child also says that the protagonist has an aura. It is blue, the old man has a green aura, and his son has a gray-green aura. The last words surprise the man. The young man is incredibly happy. He thinks about the ability to recognize a person's intentions by the colors around him, which his sister has acquired. He tugs sweetly at her cheeks and imagines the possibilities that are opening up. Afterward, the guy compliments the girl and smiles at the thought that she also has the ability, but is not a player of the system. The young man pats the child's head, which makes her smile brightly, and the last doubts leave her. After what happened to the old man's son, he will live with them on the farm and help with the household. The three of them decide to eat, while the little girl declares that if someone attacks them again, their dogs will break their necks, to which the brother reacts with a smile and jokingly asks his sister to calm his emotions. Grandpa looks at his hands and imagines how much he has to do now, avenge his son and adjust to the new world. According to the news, the world's population has decreased tenfold. Hundreds of human losses occur in seconds of time. A gray-haired man sits in the corner of the room and slowly lights a cigarette while a journalist comments on what is happening in the world. The door to the office opens and a young man in a bathrobe with dark hair enters the threshold. It turns out to be a specialist from the laboratory of the head department of a pharmaceutical company, and the chairman of the company himself addresses him. In the world, animals mutate very quickly, although attempts are made to fight them, but the fifth level of irreversible transformations has already been reached. The lab technician reports that so far scientists can hardly study the third level of the mutation, and they are not ready for it. However, the chairman interrupts him and informs him that the president of the company has disappeared and he must take his place. The vice president squeezes the bridge of his nose tightly, her face reflecting the tension. She realizes that she is about to meet a new boss sent from the head office. As she descends, a young man appears in front of her. He looks friendly and smiles affably. They greet each other and shake hands as a sign of introduction. Behind the guy stands a man in a black suit and with a sullen expression on his face. The young man immediately introduces his bodyguard, who looks very dangerous compared to his smiling master. Meanwhile, the protagonist offers his sister to buy some expensive fish and cook it. There was nowhere to get it before, but the system store gives you the opportunity to try everything. Everyone decides that it's time to do the housework. The guy picks up a scythe and puts on a cap so that the sun doesn't get in the way, and the girl and the pet merrily head to the fields. Clean beds are waiting for new seeds and sprouts, and now the company also has a mechanism for efficiently digging up the ground. The old man tugs at the dog's fur and notices that it has grown enough, which he says aloud. The young man did not notice this, but for the first time he thought about it, and indeed the dog had increased in size and height. He suggests that this is all the effect of modified vegetables that improve the physical component of the animal. Strangers appear at the gate, and the security system makes an alert about it. The vice president of the company smiles intensely. Her task was to introduce the new head to the territories for the possible construction of a new laboratory, but he did not even bother to look at them and immediately went to an unknown farm. The girl already has time to think that no one is home and the farm is empty, but the lab assistant is not going to back down until they get an answer. For better effect, the young scientist's security guard also knocks on the gate, probably so that the owners hear about the arrival of strangers. The guy greets the owner of the farm and goes inside for a serious conversation. However, the protagonist refuses them and agrees to speak only through the gate. The vice president introduces himself and pulls a business card out of his coat pocket. But all this only alarms the young man. He squints as if looking at strangers. The woman reacts tensely to these suspicions, and her colleague says that she wants to offer some kind of deal with which you can make a lot of profit. The guard swoops into the door, hoping to knock it down with his power. The attempt fails, but the protagonist receives a system alert about the ramming of the farm gate. He squints. An interesting phenomenon is what just happened. Frightened, the girl turns to the scientist and quietly asks if this is normal, and what they should do in such an awkward situation when they seem too dangerous. The guy abruptly calls out his subordinate's name, attracting his attention. He turns to him with a puzzled face, his whole look asking. And immediately he receives a ringing slap in the face from the owner. He behaved threateningly and dangerously, so it is not worth talking to respectable people. Such a lesson is given to him by the young man. After that, the man hurriedly apologizes for his behavior and swears, showing respect. This method intrigues the protagonist. He is slightly surprised by such a gesture, especially in front of everyone. The guy asks the guard to come to the gate, and he complies with his request. And immediately a fist flies into his stomach, knocking all the spirit out of the body of his subordinate. Along with the blow, a small robot bird falls into the man's pocket. After the attack, the hero says that it was a small revenge for the gate. The guard hit it, and the owner hit it. In response to this, the black-haired guy only grins. Apparently, the methods of education of his subordinate do not interest and do not touch the scientist at all. He just smiles and holds out a torn sheet of numbers, offering his number for future communication. The protagonist quickly takes the piece of paper, while his interlocutors are left standing in this awkward environment. The young man smirks. He assumes that the people of the murdered president have found the farm after all. But he is not completely sure and doubts, and the spy robot will help him to make sure of this. It's lunchtime. This time the sister has made sesame paste with lamb. She offers to try it. The dish turns out to be very appetizing and fragrant, and the old man, looking at them, wonders if they are dressed too lightly. Then the guy solemnly declares that he is about to reveal the secret, or rather, he is going to tell about the food he grows and what it does to the human body. He also adds that he expects a change in the man's body, which confuses him a bit, as if they are in a fantasy world. The young man agrees with him with a smile. To some extent this is true, or there is an explanation for all this: evolution. A short time later, the grandfather asks who came, and the hero replies that they were the people of the murdered president. The answer shocks the old man. Painful memories involuntarily creep into his head, reminding him of his grief. After a while, the guy gets on his motorcycle and hurries to follow the destination of his recent visitors. Meanwhile, they enter the vice president's house, who kindly provides them with space and a couple of rooms to rest in until they find a permanent place to stay. The girl offers them a choice of any of the 4 rooms in the house, and also informs them that dinner will be delivered to them personally. She then steps on the stairs and bids goodnight to her guests, preparing to go to her abode. She is bothered by an annoying sound that constantly appears out of nowhere. Perhaps it is a mosquito, although it is winter now and there cannot be any. Afterwards, she takes a long-awaited shower, washing off the remnants of a hard day. The girl looks in the mirror and puts a mask on her face, while a hummingbird swoops down from behind, watching her and her colleagues. The vice president opens a window to release the insect. At the same time, she notices that a stranger is climbing over her window frame, whose face is carefully hidden. Seeing, as soon as he is noticed, he immediately jumps into the room, knocking down the lady of the house. The trick gives him the opportunity to be proactive, and before the girl has time to raise the alarm, he clamps her mouth shut. Almost in flight, all the action takes place, which completely deprives the woman of the ability to somehow defend herself. She falls to the floor and a man lands on top, her face expressing fear and helplessness. The guy bends down, comparing himself to her face to face, and asks her to keep quiet in a good way. He removes his hand from her face and she tightens her hands in fear, breathing heavily. Before he can say anything, the lady of the house hurls accusations at him, suggesting that he has come to abuse her. To stop this flow of swearing, the hero suddenly squeezes the girl's lips with his fingers and then lets go. The heroine wonders whose man he is, making the assumption that he is a subordinate of the deceased director. In response, the guy also asks her if she is related to this man, to which the vice president is annoyed and declares his innocence. She is also interested in what happened, wants to get to the bottom of the truth and understand what happened then. Suddenly, there are shouts outside the door of the room, and the maid raises the alarm, realizing that the vice president is not responding. The young man then knocks her out, but from this conversation, he realizes that she really has nothing to do with the attempt on his and his sister's life. A security guard bursts into the room, and with his power, he kicks down the door to catch the stranger off guard. There is no one in the room. The main character manages to escape and remain uncaught. A man in a suit runs to the window, realizing that he ran away the same way he came. Meanwhile, the guy lands on the ground in a blind spot from the cameras, where he will not be noticed by the staff of the estate. A scientist from the head office stands in his way. He has been waiting for him, knowing that the hero will decide to leave in this way. The guy doesn't have time. He doesn't want to linger, so he attacks his opponent without hesitation. The fist lands on the knee. The blow is so strong that even the air between them tries to escape from this space. The young man is swept aside. He did not expect active resistance. In response, the black-haired man states that from such a resistance to the attack, he probably should have broken his ulna and small ones in his arm. But there's nothing wrong with him. It gets the scientist interested. He's strong enough for an ordinary guy. The scientist does not allow a single step to be taken, as he immediately goes into battle again, trying to strike again, this time the last one. He tells him that it is useless to run. He wants to test him, to find his limit. Small grains of sand fly into the face. They interfere with movement and attack. His eyes are obscured by the dust that his opponent throws at him to stop him. This stops the enemy. He bends to the ground while the protagonist runs around him and walks away. Irritation quickly shows up on his face. He coughs and tries to overcome the pain from the grains of sand. The guards run up to him. They fuss, asking if everything is all right. Despite the pain, the opponent makes his conclusion. His opponent is smart and strong. It's interesting. His subordinates help him up and ask him if he should give chase, but the lab technician does not order them to do so. Meanwhile, the doctor examines the vice president, declares that her health is not in danger and she is now simply unconscious. The scientist's security guard enters the room and informs him that a disaster has happened after the incident. More precisely, an important disk with information from the laboratory technician's computer disappeared. The protagonist returns home on a motorcycle. It is obvious that he was the one who stole the device. When he was in the house, the young man saw the computer turned on and decided to disconnect the cable from it. On the laptop, he finds a folder with an interesting name. Immediately assuming what is there, he clicks on it. Looking at the screen, he sees the results of many studies related to mutations. The scientist checks the contents of the computer, but there is no remnant of that information on it. Of course, this loss is extremely unpleasant, but the data is outdated, and the young man hopes that the thief will not be able to understand what he is talking about. However, the notes from the stolen files may well suggest the reason for his appearance in the city. Two people sit at the same laptop, read the same data, but their motivations are completely different. The protagonist realizes that their goals coincide, but they have different ways of fulfillment. The scientist wants to find a way to turn the mutation in his favor through many sacrifices. The farm now has begun to breed animals. The boy's sister sees this and is delighted with the small rabbits and pigs. The girl asks where they came from, and the guy comes up with the idea of explaining the store system like magic. A small child easily believes his words, and she already has one of the rabbits in her hands. Seeing this, the man scolds her, saying that she should not treat food like this. The baby refuses to accept the miraculous creatures as food. Then the guy begins to list all the dishes made from meat to her, which awakens the girl's appetite. This is how the guy reminds her that it is worth respecting the food grown with such difficulty. At the same time, the system receives a notification about the new type of vegetable grown. It turns out to be a rare variety of white corn, the chance of which to grow is 1 in 1,000. The guy looks up at the tall stems where the cherished vegetable is at the end. He decides to look some more among the cornfield, hoping to get a few more fruits. However, the attempt ends in failure. He only has one such corn, giving a huge power buff. Meanwhile, the vice president has already regained consciousness and is lying quietly on her bed. She recalls an unfortunate incident that happened the other day involving a stranger. She is overcome with anger at her helplessness at that moment. She looks at the computer screen, where the camera recordings are displayed, but she can't figure out who it was. In her hands, she holds a small bag with a hair inside which she accidentally found in the room. The girl goes downstairs to the vast hall, where the scientist is already resting quietly on the sofa. The woman greets him and sits down, thanking him for the effective massage method that helped her get rid of the effects of the attack. She informs the interlocutor that she has found a suitable place for the future research center. In response, the young man says thank you and asks if she is going to talk about anything else. The heroine asks if he can find the DNA of the person to whom the hair belongs. However, the scientist does not immediately agree. He tells her that it is impossible to go because there is no exact idea with whom to compare the data. The vice president replies that she only wants to find the thief who broke into her house the other day. Hearing this, the guy's face takes on a surprised look for a second. He immediately agrees to this, abruptly changing his opinion about the complexity of this procedure. There is a personal interest in this, which is why the laboratory assistant is so quickly convinced. In a huge laboratory, 3 people behind glass observe the mutation of an animal. The mad creature becomes much more furious and starts banging on the protective glass. The scientist, his guard, and his assistant calmly watch the unfolding scene. The guy maintains a calm and unflappable face, although one of the protective glasses has already been damaged. A lot of people in suits are scurrying around the huge mansion. Probably this is some kind of working technique. From the outside, the 3 boys are chatting happily. One of them asks the black-haired young man a question about his younger brother. With a dissatisfied face, he replies that he has no one, only an illegitimate son from outside. The younger one stands on the sidelines and does not communicate with anyone. Interlocutors are not too attracted to him, and he is alone. The next moment, he is mocked by drowning his face in water. The eldest is watching the whole picture. He doesn't feel sorry for his brother. He just inserts a couple of words about the need to be a little more careful because he is from their family. The poor boy turns around with tears in his eyes and asks his brother to help him, or at least let him go. At the same moment, the guy jumps out of bed. He has a nightmare about his childhood. A red flask shines in front of it. Inside it is a virus that is constantly being modified and used in the laboratory. The girl calmly lies next to the pet, using its fur as a soft pillow. Her brother passes by. He watched the dog and made sure that it did not mutate, but only improve physical development because of the vegetables from the farm. An hour later, the little girl feels hungry. Her brother told her when she wants to eat, to snack on something. She looks around the room for snacks, but turns her attention to a box in the corner of the room. Inside are glowing enhancement seeds, but the child mistakes them for unusual nuts. She decides to snack on them and feed her pet at the same time, so she suddenly puts a seed in its mouth. They turn out to be bitter, and after swallowing, the dog begins to fall asleep. At night, the old man wakes up to squeaky sounds, taking a flashlight in his hands. He goes out of the room to find the source of the noise. In the corner, he notices a large clump of black fur, traces of the animal's body, and it is not dirt at all, but blood. When the light of the flashlight hits the dog, it turns around. The man sees the dog's open mouth and fierce gaze. He recoils, startled by the sudden sight, and the strange animal jumps out of its seat. The next moment, the mad dog attacks the old man, and a desperate cry of fear resounds through the house. The animal jumps towards the man, but he manages to jump away at the last moment, dodging the sharp claws. He narrowly escapes the attack, but before he realizes what's going on, questions creep into his head about what happened to their harmless pet. However, the formidable dog with bloodshot eyes relentlessly approaches, making you feel animal fear of the mutated creature with all its appearance. Grandpa turns around, his gaze changing from frightened to surprised when he sees that the dog does not seek to attack and kill him. He decides to try to caress it, touch it, tame it. Maybe after that, the restless animal will calm down. But the dog has his own plans. He shakes his head as a sign of refusal to stroke, looks to the sides, immediately rushes in the direction of the old man again, making him frightened and jump up from his seat. It shatters the glass, jumping out, the shards flying in all directions, but not injuring the animal, as if its fur has become a shield from everything. Grandpa is surprised by this outcome. He expected a second attack, but instead, the dog jumps over him and starts running. The animal was only looking for an escape route, and now the man is watching him as the feral dog is heading for the gate, and the old man is only trying to shout to him, to warn him about the dangerous wire on the fence. Unexpectedly, the animal deftly jumps over the fence, despite its height and the danger that promises everyone who touches it. The grandfather's face shows signs of extreme surprise and shock at what is happening, but at the same time he is nervous. Soon the protagonist runs out into the street. He immediately asks what happened and if everything is okay, also wondering where their pet went. The old man points with his hand in the direction where the dog has fled, telling him what happened. The guy listens to everything. There are signs of nervousness on his face. He is surprised, but more worried that his dog attacked his own and then ran away. The hero's younger sister runs around the corner. She has an excited face. She hurries to ask her brother and good grandfather why there is such a crash and noise. In order not to disturb her, the young man assures her that their pet just got hungry for no reason and decided to hunt. And he can't do that on the farm, so he had to go outside of it. Out of anxiety, the girl completely forgot to put on her shoes and ran barefoot. The man gently takes her in his arms, reassuring her with the words that their beloved dog will soon return. In addition, he asks if the little girl gave him anything foreign, because you can only go wild because of poisonous and irradiated food, to which the child tells him that she followed all the instructions of her brother and fed only farm vegetables. And then she suddenly remembers how she recently found a box of strange and bitter nuts, which they later ate. The young man's face takes on an enraged look as he realizes that these were rare enhancement seeds issued by the system, the effects of which have not yet been tested. He does not scold the girl, only tries to calm her down and send her to sleep, promising that he will find the pet himself while the grandfather looks after the house and the baby. In the dark thicket of the forest, a dark animal moves rapidly. Its speed is so high that it can hardly be seen through the crowns of the trees. His eyes are full of fury, his pupils are white and enlarged, and steam is coming out of his mouth, and the dog thinks of wanting to attack and tear someone apart. A mysterious figure in a light cloak peeks out from behind a nearby tree, eyes sparkling in the night light, not with warmth, but with danger. An old man looks out for an animal. He sees its strength, power, and calls it a holy animal. A greedy glint is seen in his eyes, and words about appropriating the dog for himself fly out of his mouth. Meanwhile, the protagonist arrives in the same forest on a motorcycle. He has an earpiece in his ears that connects him with hummingbirds, which are his eyes and ears in a large area. They inform him that there is no target nearby. He stares intently ahead as if trying to see a feral pet, even though his trail has long since been lost, and they are probably separated by tens of kilometers. A dull rustle is heard behind the trees, indicating the presence of someone else nearby. The young man turns to see who is there. A grandmother in a white robe steps to meet him. The hood hides part of her face, but the moonlight helps to see the rest. She greets the hero. The guy reacts to the sudden exit quite boringly. He is not at all interested in conversations in the forest with strange strangers, especially at night, as long as there is a clear goal to find an escaped dog. The old lady smiles sweetly and asks him if the man knows why the catastrophe that is now haunting the whole world happened. In response, the young man is not too interested and asks if she has seen a dog running here. Then the grandmother turns to God in a higher tone, saying that this is his recompense for them, mortals who have sinned and now must die to be cleansed. It also talks about the last bastion of God's world, where you can get forgiveness without death. You just need to join a society and make membership dues. The guy looks on a little disappointed, especially when the stranger adds that since he is the owner of a holy animal, he must of course give it to the community in order to save himself from the punishment of the god. The protagonist ignores the remark, gets on his motorcycle and starts it, throwing a few words at the end that only he himself can save it. An old woman in a white robe looks after a young man who has never bothered to join their sect. Her face expresses rather disgust and anger towards the past interlocutor. Probably she did not like the sinner at all, who did not dare to correct his actions. The wind rustles peacefully on the treetops. Birds can be heard singing in the distance, and there is a white-haired guy about to light a cigarette. This is the protagonist. He closes his eyes and inhales nicotine smoke. Behind him is a light car with a body, a little shabby, but at a good speed. For a moment, he hears sounds coming from behind a bush. The rustle of leaves and branches points to a strange forest visitor. He walks up to the bush, pushing aside its greenery and staring in surprise at the object that has prevented him from enjoying the summer nature. He discovers the body of a she-wolf, trails of blood and the same red footprints stretch from her. The animal does not react at all to the guy, without even raising its head, and next to her, a squeaky ball of fur restlessly presses into her body. Puzzled, the young man lifts the puppy by the scruff of the neck. His eyes are closed. Apparently, he was born quite recently and did not have time to open his eyelids, and his paws are very tiny, however, as well as his body. The man takes it with both hands and lifts them up at eye level, smilingly inspecting the hairball sleeping peacefully in his arms. Such was their acquaintance in the distant past. Immediately the beast reappears, only not at all helpless and not so small, but large and loud, terrifying. A cry is heard, and its teeth pierce someone's leg. A man has caught the eye of an angry dog, and his companions, seeing this, stand hesitantly and do not know what to do, while their acquaintance begs to help him or call someone. Then the guys answer that they are now going to go after their boss and help him, and they themselves hold on to the first objects that come to hand for defense. A young scientist arrives, his gaze expressing seriousness after a report of a dangerous animal that has grabbed their comrade and is holding them by force without opening his jaw. One of the messengers has a gun in his hands. However, he did not use it earlier. His boss asks what happened, and the guy answers that it all happened suddenly. Suddenly, the young man is surprised by the last words of his interlocutor that the animal had been hiding in the bushes all this time before the attack. He realizes that despite the crazy appearance of the dog, which speaks of a mutation, he did not act like a madman, which is not typical for anyone who has been irradiated. He immediately notices that the animal has not killed the guard and is not going to, possibly a new high level of mutation. Seeing how the dog does not attack but uses the man as a hostage against people with guns, he also draws conclusions about his amazing intelligence. The scientist orders the guard to call more people, and they catch the dangerous animal. He also orders to bring him a weapon with a tranquilizer, while clarifying that he only needs a live dog, focusing on this. The young man is given a small iron pistol loaded with needles, with a dose sufficient to calm the beast, and he in response asks him to be careful with the dog and aim only at the limbs. He takes aim at the animal, covering one eye for accuracy, his goggles not interfering with him, and the gun gleams in the moonlight. A shot is heard with a characteristic smoke and a flash of light. The scientist's hand did not even flinch at this moment. The animal reacts sharply to the sound. Its red eyes are turned to the man, and the guard's leg is still in its teeth, covered with a trouser leg on which blood stains have long appeared. A second before the hit, he manages to jump to the side. This happens so quickly that the human eye can hardly notice, and the syringes fly into the grass. Undistracted by the failure, the guard and the young man aim again, and another shot is fired. It swings its clawed paw at the guard closest to the animal, but misses and does not touch the barely managed person. The boss is irritated. He and his subordinates fail one after another, and since everything complicates the accuracy with which they must act, it is not so easy to catch the beast. Seeing the dog tossing and turning, they realize that he wants to escape. The situation becomes even more tense. An important goal disappears from under their noses. The beast carries away its legs, moving away from the people with quick jumps, followed by orders to seize it. The protagonist stops the motorcycle. The system sends him a notification about the tracks of his dog found in less than 1 kilometer. He pulls back slightly and bumps into large prints of the dog's paw pads and blood next to them. This causes unpleasant forebodings in the guy. The guy frowns. He is sure that these are the tracks of his pet. Anxiety does not leave him after what he saw. Many cars follow the fleeing dog through this night forest. The speed of the animal is so high that even the powerful engines of cars are not able to catch up with it. From the window of a black Jeep, a scientist watches the hunt. His smile is slightly crazy. He admires the strength and speed of the animal, anticipating excellent material for research. The guy is in anticipation. The hunt only adds to his excitement to be caught. Powerful reliefs of muscles roll under the coat. He moves so fast but does not lose strength at all, as if he is beyond any laws of physics and biology. The system stops the protagonist in the middle of the forest and sends him a notification about the discovery of the creature he is looking for. In response, a request is received to enlarge the image. Then the guy sees the fleeing animal and the cars following it. His gaze lands on one of the cars, which is at the head of the chain of hunters. The guy requests to zoom in again to see the pursuers. A photo arrives on the screen where he sees a scientist from a pharmaceutical company. He is armed and closely follows the trapping process, giving instructions. The young man did not expect to see this man so soon. The thought of a mad scientist appears in his head, which is a black-haired guy in a white coat. After stopping his motorcycle, the hero expands the system window, swiping across the screen. He looks for some item that he requests from his storage, namely a rare variety of corn that gives a huge increase in strength and abilities. The dog is chased not only by cars but also by bullets that whiz past or hit the ground near the place where his paw just was. The hunters decide to apply a new tactic. The machines slightly change their direction to surround the animal and cut off all its escape routes and then finally capture it. The dog's red eyes exude rage. Steam comes out of its mouth. The animal tries to get away from annoying people and notices that they have adopted a new plan of action. The dog accelerates and rushes to the nearest tree, jumps on it, turns around and pushes off with his legs with a huge jerk. It lands on the roof of a nearby black Jeep with a deafening crash, causing the driver and passengers to scream in surprise. The rest of the hunters in the other cars begin to panic. They did not expect such an outcome, and now the animal has decided not to run away, but to attack directly. With a roar, bullets burst out of the many pistols, aimed at the beast, and he grabs the driver's hand, pulling it towards him, and thus forcing the man out of the car. Bloodstains from sharp teeth quickly appear on his suit in the elbow area. At the last second, the animal notices the danger rapidly approaching it. Only the eyes see it, and the body does not move. Suddenly, a hand appears in front of the dog's head, engulfed in blue and white flames, catching every single bullet, forcing them to stop between the phalanges of the fingers. The protagonist is embraced by an incredibly powerful force. A blinding light comes from him, and the atmosphere around shows his power. Such an unexpected appearance shocks the scientist and the dog. The former is rather in a state of extreme dissatisfaction, and the animal is surprised that the owner has found him. 3 machines surround the fiery figure of the young man but remain inactive, waiting for an order or some kind of response. In the next second, lightning-fast strikes hit everyone involved in the chase. The guy incapacitates, limiting the scientist's ability to defend and resist. The black-haired young man points his pistol and shoots without aiming. He tries to defend himself in a panic, but the bullets do not hit the target. The pupils dilate and a figure appears in front of the eyes, engulfed in rage and fire, the scientist's glasses deflecting the enemy. The protagonist swings at the enemy. The only thing that can be discerned in his body is a look that shows all his anger, strength, power, concentrated in one organism, in one person. The scientist receives a deafening blow from below, the bulk of which falls on the nose. From such an attack, his head is thrown back unnaturally. Blood splatters fly out of his nose and mouth. The crushing blow probably caused enough damage to knock him out. The next and final step of the man is to push the opponent to the side, and the laboratory assistant then flies back a few meters, knocking down everything in his path. He stands up, one eye covered in pain. The blow hit him on the head, although at the last moment the guy managed to somehow block him, and only so he did not lose consciousness. With a trembling hand, he picks up the pistol he almost lost during the attack and points it at the enemy, difficult to aim. But this is his last chance to defend. A second later, the dog bites into his neck, but he manages to shoot. The dog's body blows him aside and blood splatters fly out of the bite site. The last bullet hits the protagonist's shoulder. He did not expect it, and he is slightly swept back, and his face is distorted from pain mixed with shock. Still a night in a lonely forest and 2 travelers, the beast carries on its back the owner, who is unconscious. He is very tired. It is evident that he has covered a great distance, and on him is his master, whose clothes are soaked with blood near the shoulder. A strange white substance drips from its mouth, and it reacts to the sound when the protagonist wakes up and utters only a fragment of the full word. Immediately he falls to the ground, and the man is thrown off his back. Both of them find themselves on the cold grass. Holding onto his bullet-pierced shoulder, the boy, barely able to stay on his feet, stands up and walks with a trembling gait towards his dog, anxiously pronouncing his name to attract attention. The animal does not move. This shocks the young man. It breathes weakly, and although its eyes are open, it reflects nothing. Suddenly, white translucent threads begin to appear around the dog. They glow and envelop the dog's body, separating him from the owner, who, although he wants to intervene, but cannot. He looks at the cocoon that has formed. It is impossible to approach it. He hid the animal from everyone, fixing himself on the crowns of the nearest trees. The protagonist is extremely worried. He begins to call the system to get an explanation for what happened and to reach the beast through the dense white threads. The vice president, a security guard, and a subordinate watch the sleeping scientist through the glass. He is unconscious, and his body is covered in numerous wounds and bruises from which the pipes are coming off. Calmly, but in a nervous tone, the girl asks about what happened and how the people who pledged to protect him allowed such a situation to happen. The man in the shirt crumples up and replies that their boss was just getting carried away with the chase, and then a mysterious man appeared, whose power was so great that no one could resist it. The woman turns abruptly after such words. She is annoyed that her subordinate is talking such nonsense, fairy tales, but he swears back that it is the truth. The heroine gets angry. She pays the salaries of a lot of people so that they can talk about incredible magical cases, covering up their inaction. In the background, the devices begin to beep, the victim's pulse drops, and the doctor loudly says that this is a cerebral hemorrhage. In response, the girl demands to urgently save him. However, the doctor replies that this is impossible. The patient miraculously survived, and the indicators that have changed indicate that it is useless. It is impossible to save him, no matter how hard the doctors try. The scientist opens his eyes. His eyes are cloudy and his head is cottony. The voices of nurses can be heard in the background, an indication of an injection with adrenaline. The guy calls for his faithful guard. A hoarse voice weakly gives an order. He demands to inject him with a virus that they have modified and tested on animals in the laboratory in recent months. The man protests. He claims that not a single person has survived after this. On the contrary, all the people have gone mad so that his master risks dying a terrible death, being insane. However, the guy tilts his head slightly and says that dying as a monster or a human is equivalent for him. He asks for a chance to take a risk, all or nothing. He does not want to lose to death. He is strapped to the bed, and a hoop with explosives is attached to his neck to kill him quickly if he becomes too dangerous. At the same time, the guard asks if he should inform his relatives, to which the hero replies in the negative. They are only bound by blood and nothing more. The doctor's hand inserts a syringe with the red contents of the beast serum. Red cracks begin to appear from the puncture site, spreading throughout the body. He begins to have violent convulsions and hallucinations. His brain has no control over his body, and the red ornaments of the serum adorn his entire body, which is covered with abrasions and wounds. The vice president, watching what is happening, is horrified, his eyes radiating fear and his hands involuntarily reaching for his mouth. His guard closes his eyes so as not to see his master's torment, his face tense as if he wants to shield himself. But right now he feels and hears everything much more acutely. The protagonist is surprised when one of the white threads braiding the tree next to him begins to thin and break before his eyes. The cocoon is covered with cracks like broken glass. A strong glow emanates from it, and the young man jumps, preparing for any eventuality. The fragments begin to fall and fly away with a crack, revealing their contents like a flower. The wind picks them up and carries them away, gradually dissolving them in the air. When the cocoon opens, the guy's face changes to puzzled and surprised. He looks at what is happening with his big eyes, and the pupils try to catch the changes. A humanoid wolf emerges from there. It has developed musculature that indicates its strength. It has legs like human legs, and the fur is smoothed, remaining on the body solely to hide and protect the delicate skin of the predator. The guy looks at the picture in surprise. There is smoke around him, and the forest air cools the tip of his nose. The huge body of the wolf, about 2 meters long, looms over the guy. They look at each other but do nothing. Suddenly, the wolf grabs the young man's wounded shoulder, squeezes it, and presses on the wound, causing the hero to squint and catch his breath due to the pain. Electrical discharges of pain pass through the body, and drops of blood fly out of the wound. The wolf especially touches the sensitive place with its claw. At the same time, the grandfather persuades the younger sister of the protagonist to go to bed and not wait for her brother, arguing that now it is quite cold and soon it will be even harder to wait because of the frost. But she refuses and gives the old man her hand, showing that it is warm, and the grandfather is surprised by this, noticing how vegetables still modify a person. He sits her on his knees because he himself is very cold. Warmed by the warmth of the girl, both remain sitting in the middle of the room and waiting for the main character. It's morning, the rays of the sun are peeking into the room, and on the bed the adult and the child are quietly snoozing. They still fell asleep. unable to stand the sleepless night and waiting. The little girl wakes up quickly and hurries to meet a figure outside the gate, who is not too visible due to the rays of the sun hitting her eyes. She expects it to be her brother, who has returned with an escaped pet. The protagonist rests in the arms of a humanoid wolf. He is embarrassed and holds onto his sore shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. There are bruises under his eyes, indicating a hard and sleepless night. The guy greets his sister and smiles weakly. The girl is surprised, but her eyes light up with interest. Her grandfather runs behind him, hastily putting on his jacket, his eyes widening in surprise at what he has seen. Next, the creature is dressed. The only thing that suits it is a shirt and wide pants, tightly fitting the pumped figure. The baby continues to spin around him, studying, and the wolf notes to himself that the young mistress is still the same fidget. She jumps onto the beast's neck, holding onto its ears while its clawed hand gently supports her legs to keep her from falling. The protagonist watches all this from the sidelines. He notes that evolution in his case has made him a stronger and more perfect creature, and the beast tried to stop the attack of aggression that was before by running away from them so as not to harm them. In addition, he recalls the scientist's bite. Probably then human DNA got into the dog's body, which caused such a mutation with the acquisition of organs like in humans. The guy asked to bring him a first aid kit to treat the wound and remove the bullet, and above all to treat the scalpel for a small operation. The old man quickly complies with his request, and armed with a steel blade, the young man removes the bullet himself, extracting it from the wound. At the same time, he asks the system for carrots, which have regeneration, and from the farm's storage in his hand, he has a cherished vegetable, which he later eats. Broken ribs, ulna, and humerus begin to heal, and the epithelium of the skin covers a vast area of the wound. Feelings for a man are unpleasant but bearable. He raises and lowers his arm a couple of times, checking how it has healed, and is happy to note that he has fully recovered. All that remains is to wash the blood off his skin. The black-haired guy jumps up on the couch and sits up, touching his heart. A person's main organ shines through the skin, and from it come the red furrows of the B virus from the serum used to mutate the guy. In addition, the body is braided by sharp, bony ends coming from his spine. The mutation was successful, only it saved the scientist from death at the last moment. He again fills the body in the area of the heart, all the new mechanisms and outgrowths in order to understand the sensations. The vice president, the doctor, and his guard look on in amazement. They expected him to fail in his crazy idea, but they were amazed by the result. Not in a hurry to rejoice, the guy turns to his people and says that he has only a week left to live, although the mutation has passed. But it is not stable, however. In the end, the DNA of the beast he tried to catch earlier can help. He is buttoning up his shirt sleeves when his subordinate knocks and enters the room, announcing the arrival of an important guest from law enforcement. Then the guy announces that he will be out now. His assistant asks if it is dangerous to mess with the law enforcement agencies now, to which he receives the answer that the young man is probably now the strongest man on the planet due to a mutation. In addition, he remembers that there is another strong guy who protected the beast during the hunt, and he may also be the thief who recently broke into the vice president's house. In the large hall, he is greeted by the solitary figure of an officer. The scientist immediately greets the guest, and without a pause, he turns to her, smiling and asking if she is embarrassed by his appearance. She replies in the negative, but her gaze betrays her. The girl draws attention to the man's physique and strange bony outgrowths, and asks if this should interest her. The young man takes off his shirt to show his body. He says he won't live long and he needs some help. As the 7 days passed, his heart would be more and more squeezed by the bony outgrowths. Eventually, they would pierce him, and the moment of final death would come. The scientist holds out a small plastic bag with a hair and asks him to find the owner of the DNA. The girl, without hesitation, agrees with the scientist's proposal and takes the evidence from his hands. The protagonist has received new seeds that give boosts in the field of evolution, making the organism more susceptible to change and less susceptible to regression. He squeezes them in his hand and jokingly thinks, and if everyone on Earth evolves so well, then the guy will be the dominant person, a god. Seeds require good soil and preparation. For this, you need to spend money on improvement, which the man does, raising the level of black soil to 16th. As he looks at the new stats, the hero stumbles upon a table with a countdown showing when the next crisis will occur. The protagonist decides to buy more agricultural robots. There will be another major crisis soon, and it will not hurt to increase the yield of valuable products. An old woman from the forest in a white cloak addresses a man dressed in the same way. She asks for an audience with His Excellency, as she has very useful information for the cult. They follow a long corridor. Monotonous voices can be heard from all sides, reciting prayers day and night, the atmosphere oppressive. Strangers enter a huge room decorated with church symbols, and in the middle at the end is their main attribute, a cross near which two figures stand. A man in the same cloak, only more ornate and with a golden border, is talking quietly to his subordinate dressed in a suit. His Excellency greets the guest with a smile. He is ready to listen to her if she wants to tell interesting information. Then the old woman told him that she had met a sacred beast. The high priest turns to his subordinate, who turns to him, telling him that soon their god, fed by a new sacred beast, will be able to gain enough strength to appear to his people. And from a deep well, shrouded in darkness, a voice answers them. Frightening, creaking, hearing about the sacred beast, he declares that he wants to eat it. A young girl in a breaking news reports on a terrible accident that occurred in the suburbs, where a family was injured, both parents died, and their child was thrown onto the branches of a tree, but he survived. The protagonist cooks and listens to a news program in the background. When he sees what happened, he is horrified and sympathizes with the family. He looks at the clock and realizes that his mom and dad are late. Putting the knife aside, the guy decides to call and ask when they will be home. No one picks up the phone. The answering machine repeats several times that the phone is offline or switched off. Fragrant dishes are sadly cooling down on the table. The son was waiting for his parents, and time was inexorably slipping away like sand. Hot sparks and ashes are in the air. On the burnt ground lies a shattered phone, showing no signs of life, turned off, or simply out of order. The fire is showing its strength with might and main. The air is heating up, and several firefighters near the car are trying hard to get rid of the flames. A little girl is lying on a gurney. Her face is covered with abrasions and ashes. Adults nearby are screaming, giving instructions. You need to take her to the hospital as soon as possible. Trucks, especially firefighters, continue to arrive at the scene of the fire, which are in short supply. The little girl sits in the room, washed and given clean clothes. She leans tiredly on a pillow while the nurses outside the room gossip about what happened. The girl's eyes are tired. Gray circles lie under him, caused by tears and a sleepless night. The medical staff whispers that the deceased family had just adopted a child when they got into a fatal accident. Meanwhile, one mentions that the orphanage from which the baby was taken did not even fill out all the paperwork for the adoption to the end, and the adoptive parents have already taken her. The other in response asks about the relatives of the victims. They should come soon. While the women are talking, one of the visitors asks them to show them where the morgue in the hospital is located. A girl in uniform accompanies a lonely young man, and she asks the question. A nurse escorts them to the morgue. The hero quietly follows the women without raising his head. He looks down and his gaze radiates emptiness, no emotion on his face, just a thoughtful and sad look. He looks up as everyone enters the cold room with the breath of death to recognize the dead as their parents. Charred bodies lie on the couches. It is difficult to identify them, as well as to imagine that they were once alive, as if life itself bypassed them, immediately leaving them to death. The officer turns around and looks pitifully at the guy. She utters words of deep sorrow and condolences. A devastated look, a face of mute shock, and lips whispering softly that these are not his parents. These people cannot be related to him. A deep shock shocks him. A nervous smile appears on his face. It's all a mistake. It's not his mom and dad, and even an unknown child. His parents couldn't be in the same car with her. Embarrassingly, a police girl asks the young man to prove that this is his family with a DNA test, and he agrees. An empty and cold corridor, a lonely bench in the middle of it, and a young man with his head in his hands as if to protect himself from seeing the walls of the hospital, hearing the chilling silence of the morgue. His pupils are constricted and his eyes are staring at the floor. He can't believe that all this is happening to him, that this is his family, who were smiling happily at their son in the morning. Suddenly, a little girl with dark hair approaches the guy. She tugs at his jacket to draw attention to herself. The little girl calls him brother and asks for forgiveness. Her eyes turn tiredly to him and filled with sadness. She quietly says that it's all because of her, that if she hadn't asked to be taken away from the orphanage after another beating from the director, the accident would not have happened, and everyone would have remained alive and happy. She barely has time to continue her speech when the guy impulsively scoops her into a tight embrace. He quietly says that it's not her fault, it's just the way it is. Meanwhile, an officer comes out of the lab. She reports that the results of the test confirm that these are his parents. The probability is 99.9%. Tears of grief quietly run down the young man's cheeks as he continues to hug the crying baby. A girl from the police again offers her condolences, and muffled moans and sounds of crying can be heard in the corridor. Now there are 3 people in the empty room, and everyone is gripped by a spirit of sadness and sorrow. The lab technician abruptly runs and throws papers with the study on the table. They found a match to the DNA of the thief's hair in the database of previous years. The scientist abruptly turns and looks at him after hearing about the result of the intruder's search. On paper, there is a complete dossier on the guy with his place of study, address, name, relatives, and brief information about his actions over the past years of his life. The black-haired man asks if this is all, to which his assistant replies in the affirmative. However, she is also interested in something. She asks about the root of the boss's confidence that this thief is the attacker during the hunt, to which the guy explains that an ordinary person would not be able to resist him, and the level of physical fitness of a thief and an unknown in the forest is the same as the source of their power. He also puts forward 2 versions. The first says that he was hiding for about 20 years. There he trained to this level, but on the other hand, he is too inexperienced, which refutes this version quite strongly. The next version is that he is the result of a mutation, and this is also his motive, why he protected the wolf, because the source of their powers is the same, and he guards the secret. In response, the girl also refutes this idea because the probability of surviving and remaining in an adequate mind is 0.001%. And here in one city, there are already 2 successful variants of the mutation, her boss and an unknown one. She theorizes that the mutation is not caused by a virus, but evolution that has a different source of power and proceeds in a different way without risks. The guy is still looking through the papers, looking for more details about the person. He is silent and does not respond to his assistant's version. Then the guy breaks into a smile when he realizes that this is really the case and that there is another key in the world for a successful mutation with perfect evolution. Elsewhere, the boss of a police girl who recently visited a scientist orders her to spy on him in the interesting target of yet another mutation. The protagonist carries a basket of vegetables in his hands while ordering fertilizer for his fields in the system store. He sprinkles it all over the garden, and the plants immediately begin to grow vigorously, and the boy's sister from behind looks at it all with burning eyes. They turn around at the sound of running and screaming, Grandpa hurriedly calling them because something unusual has happened. The wolf began to climb to the roof every day, but today he does not come down to the ground, no matter how much the old man calls him. The guy realizes that after the evolution, the sensitivity of the beast has sharpened. Perhaps he feels danger, so he does not want to get off. Then he orders the robots of the system to inspect the farm. Suddenly, a notification comes to the phone. It vibrates and calls to check the message. The guy takes it in his hands to look at the cause of the concern. As soon as he looks at the incoming message box, his eyes widen and his face expresses surprise. He is extremely shocked. While the girl is talking to the old man, the basket of vegetables falls to the ground, attracting their attention, and the guy, on the contrary, does not pay attention to it at all. Cold sweat covers his body. He can't believe what he saw. It's impossible. The man needs to check if it's true, and if what happened is even real. The car's engine is hurriedly started, and he, without wasting a minute, drives out of the farm gate, which closes with a click. The panel of the system shows an image of a moving car. It gives off a slightly blue color, but does not prevent you from understanding that the hero has just left the village and is moving along a deserted road. The black-haired young man's yellow-green eyes reflect this image, his eyes following the car as if he would lose sight of it if he turned away, although the cameras would follow the car to the end. The scientist tells his assistant that the target has left the farm, which means that they can start the operation since they have lured out the main enemy. His guard notes that it is a bit expensive and costly to use expensive reconnaissance drones on such an old farm, owned by no means a rich man. The young man points his finger at the screen. He notices that the farm is in very good condition, the soil is fertile, and the security system is too good for the average person. He agrees with the thought of his subordinate. The computer panel also reflects a photo from the farm, where you can see the house, the garden, and the entire territory from a bird's eye view. In addition, you can see endless green fields with fertile land and good plants, although now nothing is grown on poisonous land, but a method is used where vegetables are planted in water rich in minerals and vitamins. The scientist says that you need to plan the operation carefully and be careful. Since the man was able to injure him earlier, then you should treat it with concern, and his guard compares the farm to a military base. The young man then adds that they will disable all the equipment, including the security robots, with a microwave blast, and it will be easier to catch the beast because there are no more obstacles. Several helicopters appear in the sky. They head towards the farm, although they warn of their presence very audibly due to the noisy blades of equipment. The next thing helicopters do is start emitting microwave waves to neutralize dangerous robots, which may be able to give a good rebuff even to armed and well-equipped specialists. In addition, they scan the area, which shows them several bodies emitting heat waves, which means that there are people and animals inside. The cockpit of the helicopter opens, and then 4 people appear, 3 guards and the scientist himself, all equipped with special ammunition for the operation and radios for communication. They leap without wasting a minute, quickly and accurately approaching the execution of the plan, and the dangerous scientist with a new device caused by a mutation becomes even more deadly. Meanwhile, the protagonist arrives at the cemetery. It is quiet, a light breeze blows, and tombstones surround the guy, radiating a strange calm and reverence. He looks at the grave of his parents. The empty, desecrated pit indicates ungodly actions, and on the marble slab there is an inscription dedicated to beloved parents and good people from his son. This is a pair burial. The guy quietly says a curse. He is disgusted because of the actions of unknown people, who also sent a message about the crime, as if they wanted to throw the hero into a rage to put pressure on the patient. He doesn't understand how they dared. It wasn't a prank, but such a terrible act. The young man once again checks his phone, where an unknown person writes that he has the ashes of his parents, and if he wants to get it back, he needs to give the sacred beast his hand and leg. The man thinks about who the blackmailer is because the same mad scientist paid attention to the beast, as well as an unknown old woman whom he met in the forest, and she invited him to join their sect. His parents would be horrified if he only gave his limbs for their ashes. The hero picks up the phone and begins to type a reply message with an evil smile. His reply is flaunted in the chat, where he said that the unknown person can take the dust for himself and go home. He is not interested in such an exchange, but he gives all this only one day. Otherwise, he will send him to his parents to crawl on his knees and beg for his forgiveness. The young man suggests that it must be the old woman, because the scientist would not use such dirty methods and would rather go one-on-one with him than do it. He turns around due to the abrupt notification of the system. The alert says that the farm has been attacked, and the danger there is no small level 99. The enemies decided to surround the house and enter from all sides in order to have the effect of surprise and take people by surprise, and then attack. The main hand signals to move on to the door and be ready to make a noisy surprise attack. Suddenly, their radars begin to show that there is no one inside who radiates heat. This confuses people. They do not know what to do next. Meanwhile, a wolf hangs over them, hastily climbing onto the roof. Powerful muscles show through his tank top, and a baby sits on his back, both tense and angry at such a sudden attack. The eye of vision, which the girl has acquired in the course of evolution due to the consumption of modified vegetables and fruits, allows her to show her who among those who are at home who is dangerous to them. Seeing this, the girl gives an order to the wolf. He must destroy the enemies down in dust, quickly deal with it, and ensure the safety of her, the farm, and the old man. The windows of the house are shattered due to objects thrown inside by enemies. The glowing bomb begins to emit the brightest rays. They spread throughout the room to neutralize, stun the beast and the people inside, but they are not there, so this is a useless step. The guards ducked so that they were not blinded by the rays, hid behind the walls of the house, carefully monitoring the situation near the house. One of the enemies gives the order to storm the house after the light attack ends. The house is no longer illuminated, the street is empty, everyone has climbed inside through broken windows. As soon as the opponents entered the room, they saw that no one was there, only the remnants of a light weapon lying on the floor, indicating some kind of human action. The scientist bends down. He examines the entire room for traces of the animal's presence or any clues that might lead to their trail. An unexpected sound shocks him and the rest of the crew, his pupils dilated and his eyes wide open. Rays of blue light hit everyone inside one by one. By some miracle, they do not touch the guy, but around him there is a chaos of pierced arms, bodies, drops of blood that fly all over the room. All the beams come from the window, but it is also the only way out of the room, where all the people are open like targets to attack. The young man rushes to the window in the opposite direction, which is still intact only because no one has entered through it or thrown a light weapon. Along with their subordinate, they both jump out of the room, shards of glass brushing against their skin, but nothing compared to the deadly rays that hit everything in their path. As soon as his feet touch the ground, he hurries to raise his head to see who and how attacked him and his men, who took them by surprise as they prepared their own trap. In front of him lie the corpses of some of the guards who were left outside to warn of the dangerous situation. They are dead, and next to them is a whole pool of blood. He looks up and realizes that his perfect plan has been beaten. The protagonist has somehow learned of the danger and taken unexpected measures. In front of him, a white-haired boy and an old man stood proudly, and they were surrounded by menacing robots clad in perfect white iron, the same ones that had launched the beam attack a few minutes before. The young man greets him with a menacing look. He says that he understands everything. His enemy has come to his house solely for revenge and nothing more. He also adds that he really had to work hard to dig up information about him, and is told that it wasn't that difficult with the scientist's connections. The specialist has nothing more to say. He needs a modified genome. Without it, he will die, so he justifies his plan of attack. For him, he will fail, and do nothing is the same thing. Behind the young man stands the grandfather. He abruptly adds that it is necessary to deal with the enemies, calling for this man. The old man still addresses the hero, but now he turns to his opponents. He shouts about their cruelty. These words are saturated with pain and memories of his murdered son. Looming menacingly over the enemy, the protagonist dryly asks him where his parents' ashes are. He accuses him of it and adds that it was indeed a good way to lure him out of the house. In response, he gets a moment's silence, and then the guy declares that he does not understand what he is talking about. The young man is overcome by suspicions. He is not ready to believe in such a thing right away. And on the other hand, his enemy is standing here alone, surrounded by two of his people. At a disadvantage, he would not be able to lie now. He really does not know what kind of dust the guy is talking about. Both look at each other. The scientist seems to be trying to look into the eyes of his opponent, to see that he believes him, because his life now depends on it. Then the protagonist asks the rival again. It turns out that he did not steal the ashes of his parents, to which he receives a nervous answer, whether it is a joke on his part. He remains silent and looks ahead, pondering the scenarios that led to this situation. The high priest yells and swears, calling the protagonist an irreverent puppy. He has just thrown the phone on the floor with a swing. Apparently, he was infuriated by the man's response messages to threats. He stomps on his cell phone while continuing to shout obscenities. How could this young guy say such a thing about his parents? Because if he were in his place, he would not dare to treat him like this and would not spare anything for them. His subordinates look at each other nervously. The outburst of anger frightens them a little, but it is not the first and not the last, so you just have to stand and be silent, waiting for him to calm down. His Excellency looks up. He realizes that the sacred beast will not fall into their hands. They will not be able to fulfill the will of their god and bring the much-desired prey. When he stutters about his worthlessness during an outburst of anger and hatred, his henchmen decide to finally calm the boss down. They say that they will find new offerings that the god is already accustomed to, but all they get in response are cries that it will not suit the deity. And what is more interesting is that the man calls the spirit Mother. Suddenly he pauses his angry speech when he hears soft and affectionate words. She calls out to him. He stops swearing and turns away from his subordinates, slowly begins to approach the well with the deity with his mother. From the outside, it looks crazy, which is what his henchmen notice. They look warily at the spectacle and then nervously look at each other. A smile of reverence appears on the face of the high priest. He sees a dazzling divine light in front of him. He calls him, he lures him, he wants to caress and comfort him after failure. A beautiful feminine figure with long hair opens her arms in front of him. A mother wants to hug her son, and he obediently walks towards her with small steps. Then the priest falls into her open arms. He cries, begs her not to hit her and not to be angry with him, his failure. He promises that he will soon please her, get the sacred beast and the guy who was so blasphemous to his own parents. The dazzling light disappears, and in its place a darkness forms next to it, which the man so greedily embraces. From the outside, it is evident that all this time he has been embracing a terrifying thing that whispered words of forgiveness to him so sweetly, but in fact is something dead and sinister, not at all like the deity and his mother. The protagonist turns on the Eye of Truth, which shows him all the characteristics of the one he is directing the ability on, which came about due to genetically modified vegetables and fruits from the system store. Opposite him is a dying guy. The minutes of his life are running out due to a mutation that has gone down a negative path. A twisted evolution would have killed him, but the wolf genome intervened when it bit the young man's neck. He realizes that his goal is DNA samples of a new animal, which will likely prolong its life and make evolution right. He addresses the enemy, although he did not steal the ashes. But the purpose for which he came here is already a reason for death. He will not let the scientists go just like that. At his wave, the robots are activated and begin to increase the power of the system for attack. Suddenly, the man asks him to stop. He is almost desperate because he is open to the attack and will not survive it. He exclaims loudly, returning to the subject of ashes. It is important to the young man, and the scientist has the opportunity to bring it back. The man tells his opponent that, in fact, there are no deep grievances and hatreds between them, as well as irresolvable differences. He asks for the reasons of searching for the gene, and the hero tries to protect this knowledge. Why not turn it into a deal? The guy looks at this proposal with interest and thinks about it. It has a benefit. He then raises his hand upwards, pausing the guardian robots. The scientist looks tiredly at the man. He also offers to exchange resources regarding the deal as an exchange option. Then the protagonist clarifies whether he will help him return the ashes, to which he receives the answer that the man has extensive connections, and with them he can do almost anything. But the young man is not ready to change so easily. He himself will sooner or later get to the kidnappers, so he needs to be offered something more worthwhile. He also clarifies why he said he had the resources and not the pharmaceutical company where he worked, to which he explained that he was only their consultant and only interested in his own interests. He doesn't care who he killed earlier, who belonged to the head of the holding, whether he wanted to hurt the vice president. He has nothing against the man, and therefore he can cooperate. He also declares that he can become his tool, which causes a sly smile on the face of the protagonist. Such words make him even more interested in the deal. The scientist boldly steps towards the guy. He says that he gets a saving gene, and the opponent is a convenient tool. The guy holds out his hand in agreement to the deal, expecting him to shake it. The man smirks and looks at him with clear eyes. And then, putting his hands in the pockets of his jeans, he walks around him, not even intending to shake hands. He says quietly, the black-haired youth needs to first order his men to drop their weapons, raise their arms, and sit in the corner of the wall. The guy follows the hero straight into the house, where they stop in the living room. He, the old man, the wolf, the girl, and his temporary ally. The baby checks his intentions with the eye of good and evil, allowing her to see a person's aura depending on whether they are dangerous or not. A green glow emanates around the man. It indicates that the person is now in a relatively peaceful mood, although he is not a friend to them. The girl then nods to her brother that everything is fine, and they can continue the conversation as long as they are not in danger. The man notices the boy's interested look at the wolf. He tells him not to be nervous, because this is the very genome he so desperately wanted. The scientist is surprised. He does not understand how an animal that only yesterday walked on 4 legs is already today a humanoid creature dressed in the ordinary clothes of mortals. Then the hero explains to him that this happened due to the entry of his genes into the dog's body, which caused a mutation of a new type. Especially since human DNA successfully worked on the animal, his genome should also help the dying scientist. He is amazed that the beast has not only retained its self-awareness, but has also grown in intelligence, although all such cases have previously led to mutual madness on the part of man and animal. Such an opportunity makes him extremely happy. As soon as the guy unravels the secret of evolution, he will put the genome on the assembly line of the plant and will be able to cure everyone. Hearing this, the protagonist claps his hands to distract the interlocutor. He says that the tour is over and it's time to make a deposit in their deal. Then he pulls out his phone and shows the messages he received during the day, saying that they are the ones he should use to find the intruders. In response, he receives a little resistance. The scientist's time slips through his fingers. He needs to get the saving gene and then solve the problems. However, the guy refuses this. His ally is not in a position to bargain now. The scientist accepts this, exhales and says that he understands everything and will do what is required. A plane lands on the farm. A hooded guy gets out of it. Behind him, he supports a heavy backpack with his hands. A young guy in glasses enters the room. He cheerfully greets everyone around him. Holding a laptop in his hands, this is a hacker who arrived on the call of a scientist. The man hands him the phone so that he finds out the geolocation of the unknown interlocutor. The young man is surprised that he was brought for such a simple task. Next, he adds that after that, he also needs to fix all the equipment on the farm, which was disabled due to microwave waves. Whispering quietly under his breath of indignation, he turns the computer away and sets it down on the table to get to work. Fingers tap quickly on the keyboard, and in the background the guys talk to each other, and the scientist declares that he is really good at what he does and will be able to help. The guy is still mumbling and making him wait longer while he does his job. While waiting, the protagonist asks his ally how he became a mutant. Is this really the age of the gods, which he wrote about in his research, stolen then from the residence of the vice president? In response, the guy is a little surprised that he watched the tapes and even understood what it was about. He says that together with his team, he extracted mutations from cells, but later realized that they are still uncontrollable. Then the hero asks the next question, did he really understand all this as a result of research conducted on humans? The scientist does not believe that his methods are cruel. The pharmaceutical company has conducted such experiments before him, but they were useless, so at least his research will not be done in vain. The protagonist calls his ally a madman, and all he gets in response is laughter. He adds that the advancement of science and biology was only due to the countless corpses that were used for it. And when the world is on the verge of an apocalypse, as it is now, this will not change. The phone screen glows blue, a sign that a message has arrived on the phone. The protagonist sees that the hacker has finally found clues and sent them to his email. He also asks where his address came from, to which he replies that knowing his photo, he can find everything. He looks through his glasses, which are equipped with a special system capable of showing all the information about a person. The guy reports that he heard all the whispers from the hero, so if he continues to doubt his abilities, he will not convince him in the best way. The boy's boss becomes embarrassed by his threats and tells him that if he doesn't shut up, he will cut the funding in half. Guards stand lazily outside the church, one of them yawning as a fly flies next to his face. When he opens his eyes, he sees an annoying insect and is surprised that they are still there in such a cold time. His partner in today's service notices this and looks at him. Suddenly, the fly turns out to be a hummingbird robot that directs a small killing charge directly into the guard's brain. Immediately after, before he knows it, the second guard is killed in exactly the same way. The protagonist finds himself on the roof of the church. He carefully observes what is happening below. The guy is dressed in loose clothes, and a holster with a pistol rests on his shoulder. The head priest opens a casket with strange red seeds. There are many other worshippers around him. They are peacefully reading prayers. Then they bring their hands to the jewelry from the box. Everything happens so measured and calm. Two young guys pick up a strange thing and eat it. His Eminence, with deep circles under his eyes, proclaims them to be the children of God and invites them to partake of the offering. A girl lies beside him, her glassy eyes staring into nowhere, lifeless and cold. The dead body is surrounded by priests, but in all this chaos they are ordinary. Their bloody ritual does not embarrass people in the least. Men greedily begin to devour the entrails of the murdered girl. The protagonist looks down on this disgusting mess. He is horrified. He decides to act urgently to stop the desecration of the girl and attacks one of the pair of devourers. Blood splatters appear next to the others, and the young man shoots randomly and kills. Crowds of people in white scream and start scattering, fearing for their miserable lives. The head priest turns in the direction of the shots. He shouts and asks who dared to stop them. A man looks at him, their eyes meet, but he expresses rage and disgust. Under these feelings, he points a gun at the chief of the murderers in order to punish him. In addition, he orders his hummingbirds to destroy all those involved in the church. Corpses fall with thuds to the cold church ground. Retribution has come to take their lives. In an effort to kill his grace, he was to be hit by a bullet. but his follower protected him from the bullet at the last moment. The next bullet lands a meter away from him. The man tries to crawl away to save himself. The protagonist is gripped by rage, like an angel of vengeance. He came for every soul that took lives in God's temple. The crazy priest smiles nervously. He tells him that he will get in trouble if he kills him. But this does not prevent the hero from pointing the gun. He will be able to resist anyone and is not afraid. One of the slain, who had eaten the strange grain earlier, began to have strange tentacles crawling out of his mouth. Seeing this, the priest tries to stall for time to talk to the man. The dead body comes back to life. The guy rises to his knees and spews dark goo out of himself. The body rises and an ominous atmosphere begins to emanate from it. The guy turns abruptly when he realizes that not all the dangers are gone. The monster's head pops out of the follower's mouth, revealing that all is not over. A few seconds later, a nasty monster appears next to the man, leaving a path of slime. The guy realizes that there are two monsters, and now they will attack. Dark and terrifying, huge creatures are closing in on the guy, gun in hand, but the supply of bullets is not endless. He points a gun at them, hoping to finish them off with a single blow. The monsters suddenly make a jump to lean on the guy with their whole body and gnaw his small neck with their sharp teeth. Shots are heard, noise obscures the ears, but the adrenaline is so overwhelming that you need to focus only on the fight. The bullets don't hurt the monsters. One of them swings its long tail to knock the guy down. He decides that he needs to look for something more effective in the store. The system displays a pretty good weapon. He taps on the screen to buy it. However, the guy has recently splurged on seeds, so he doesn't have enough to buy. As a result, he decides to take hummingbirds, which immediately attack opponents. They fire small charges that hit the creatures with a bang and light. But after being hit, there is no trace left on them. They are invulnerable to bullets or robot needles. The guy is hiding behind a wall, thinking about what to do next. He is nervous, but he needs to keep fighting. From behind, the monsters are already catching up with him, their eyes furiously watching the young man and their nose smelling any scent at a great distance. He decides that it is necessary to at least neutralize them with the help of blindness, or rather to hit them in the eyes with pistols. As soon as the man is about to carry out his plan, purple eyes appear next to him. He has been found. He turns abruptly, his jaw tightly shut and his eyes expressing horror. The police receive a call. It is picked up by an officer who had previously come to the scientist and accompanied the main character to identify the bodies of his parents. An unfortunate old lady complains about an explosion that occurred near her house. Her granddaughter is holding on to her grandmother. She is shaking with fear and says that she is afraid of what happened. The woman does not get lost and asks her for the address, saying that everything will be fine and they will come in a moment. She is followed by the other officers. They realize that something strange had happened in the area involving a powerful monster. One of them even says that maybe it's a good chance to curry favor if they catch a dangerous creature. Meanwhile, in the church, the guy is pinned against the wall, breathing heavily and exhausted from the battle. He scans the organs and the system tells him that some bones are broken, so he takes a vegetable from the warehouse that can regenerate. The mad priest notices this, shouting to him that this is not the time for a meal, while reveling in his failure. The creatures are not going to let the young man go. Not giving him a break, he attacks again. He then breaks through the wall along with the hero's body, sending him to the other side of the church with a powerful attack. Unfortunately, however, they themselves get stuck in a narrow wall, and His Grace's indignation can be heard from behind. For a second, he managed to avoid death. This is a chance to rest a little and come up with a new plan. He looks around and sees a lot of girls in the room with shackles on them that won't let the poor heroines go. The unfortunate girls are crying, asking for help, looking pityingly in the direction of the guy. They are frightened by the loud sounds of battle. The hero sees this picture and is horrified, realizing that the priests have been kidnapping women for months and then bringing them as gifts to their god, killing them. He breaks out in a cold sweat. In addition to all those crimes, the ministers also ate poor girls. He realizes that he is in a closed room and the only way out is through a hole in the wall filled with monsters. On the statue, he notices a blade, which is his new defense option, since the bullets couldn't even damage the creatures. With sharp leaps, he climbs onto the statue and realizes that the blade is not so simple. It was once forged by an ancient master, and this sword was passed down through the dynasties, a real work of martial art. He is distracted by the sounds of monsters. They are almost free, Soon they will attack again. He nervously looks at the picture that opens up. He needs to do something to protect himself and not to give the kidnapped under attack. The young man jumps down from the statue and rushes at the creatures as he runs, a sharp sword flashing in his hands. He unleashes multiple slashes in an effort to deal as much damage as possible. Wounds appear on his body and slime-like blood leaks from them. He has finally found something that can injure creatures. He then runs to the side to draw attention to himself, and the monsters follow him. The plan succeeds, and ominous clumps of slime waste no time in following him. He stops abruptly to give himself a second to exhale and prepare to defend himself. The creatures jump up and open their mouths, aiming their sharp teeth directly at the hero's neck. The man deflects the blow of the reptile's powerful tail, even though he is swept back. Placing his sword in the ground to hold him in place and find his footing, he exhales, a bruise on his face. As soon as the hero looks up, he immediately sees a shadow attacking him again. This is his chance. The protagonist understands this, takes a stand, preparing his sword. His next action is a slashing blow, the point of the sword greedily digging into the parasite's throat. Gathering all his strength and will into the hilt of his sword, he moves its blade and cuts off the monster's entire head. Both creatures are defeated. The young man is breathing heavily, but he is alive and has emerged victorious in this battle. Now it's the priest's turn. A young man appears behind him, and the man swallows nervously the fear that rises to his throat. He points the blade of his sword at him, burning with rage and a desire to avenge all the sacrifices that have been made. Putting all his strength into it, the protagonist lowers the sword on the mad worshipper.